So have you ever asked the Lord a question and his response has been quite different from what you expected? Have you ever asked the Lord a question and his response has been quite different from what you had expected? That happened to me yesterday as I was asking him about what I was supposed to share this morning. I'm very conscious of the fact that we live in wild times, unprecedented times, times unlike any of us have seen before. And so sometimes I'm asking the Lord specifically for a now word, a here's what you need to know in the moment word. And what he said was a little weird. What he said was a little weird and on the surface sounds kind of trivial. But there was a weightiness to it that told me otherwise. In fact, it felt very serious, like an urgent warning or a critical piece of information. So I want to encourage you to listen with care. And so, Father, I do ask right now that you'd speak through me and that you'd give each one of us ears to hear what your Spirit is saying to us and to our church. So when I asked that question, I heard the Lord say, tell them I'm going to give them honey. Tell them I'm going to give them honey. And as I listened, he continued, when each one of you was saved, I promised you a land flowing with milk and honey, and I meant that promise. And I'm about to make good on it. I will give you honey. I know, that's a bit weird, but it's okay. Sometimes the Lord speaks in unusual ways because he wants what he says to be memorable. And it's kind of cheesy, but it's also true. He is giving a word about honey because honey is sticky and this word is meant to stick. This word is meant to stick. In fact, there's probably a couple of you right now thinking, Pete's having one of his weird some days. But you'll thank me later because some of this isn't going to make sense to you immediately, but it will do in 6 months. Anyway, as I studied honey, I found 3 individuals whose stories included honey. I believe nearly all of you will be able to relate to at least one of them. The first is Samson. Judges 14:1-9 says, Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. I'm not quite sure what the modern equivalent of that would be, but you know, Dad, you need to fix me up. She's hot or something. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. After some days, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there were a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of a lion. God is in this, but Samson isn't being led by him. Samson's being led by lust, by what he wants and wants right now. Because of that, he's spiritually dull and insensitive. I mean, seriously, you're about to start an off-limits relationship and a lion attacks you on the way. What is that if it's not a warning? And it's obvious that he's aware that he's done things he should not have, because we're told twice that he doesn't tell his parents what he's done. There's a strong warning in here for someone. Don't take the path that almost killed you last time. Don't take the same path that almost killed you last time. Samson was dedicated to the Lord and separated for his purposes. He was not supposed to touch anything that was dead. You see, friends, some honey is not from the Lord. It is sweet, but it's also deadly. Though it tastes good, it leads you away from the Lord. I talked through the life of Samson a few years ago at Destiny and took away from it a very specific lesson. You see, God gave Samson a specific calling to deliver Israel from the Philistines. And he gave Samson a specific lifestyle to live as a Nazarite, one completely set apart for God. A Nazarite was not allowed to drink wine or even eat grapes. A Nazarite was not allowed to come into contact with a dead body. A Nazarite was not allowed to cut his hair. You see, when God calls you to a task, he also calls you to a lifestyle. The lifestyle supports the calling. If you reject the lifestyle, you are, in fact, also rejecting the calling. It's a very important lesson, and many people, even in ministry, don't understand that. Mostly this happens when someone just wants to be like everyone else, when they get tired of living by a different set of rules. But friends, not everyone is called to what you're called to. So they don't have to live the same life that you live. Again, think about that if you are an athlete. Different athletes have different types of training. They don't all do the same thing. What God has called you to has a lifestyle that will support it. And it looks different from the next person in some of the details. Mostly this happens when someone just gets tired. They want to be like everyone else. They're tired of living by a set of rules. Like I said, it's not that not everyone is called to what you're called to, so they don't have to live the same lifestyle as you. It's not directly in the text, but I picture Samson walking through the vineyard and helping himself to a few grapes. Strike one. Then when he goes back, walking through the vineyard again, he touches a dead body. Strike two. And ultimately, as most of you will remember, he gets into another inappropriate relationship and Delilah cuts his hair. Strike three. He has ignored all three things he was supposed to avoid. Then Samson is captured by the enemy and has his eyes gouged out. Let me translate that this way. All his vision is lost. The enemy wants to take away your vision, wants to take away your clarity. He wants to take away your vision for what you're supposed to do with your life. In Proverbs 29, I think it's verse 18, maybe it's verse 8, says, where there is no vision, the people perish, or where there's no revelation, the people cast off restraint. So I'm not sure who that's for, that image of Samson, but it is critical that you don't blow it off. You don't blow off what I'm saying, because the consequences will be significant. The second individual is Jonathan. Many years later, the Philistines are again oppressing Israel, perhaps because Samson didn't complete the mission that God gave him. The Philistines were one of Israel's main enemies. Interestingly, the word Philistine means to roll in self. To roll in self. What does that look like? Well, I think we could start with being selfish, being self-centered. We could look at things like self-pity. And I'd suggest that that's still one of the most significant battles each one of us has to fight. Samson couldn't win the battle out there because he didn't win the battle in here. Anyway, Jonathan has had enough of their oppression and he decides to go pick a fight. It's one of the bravest acts anywhere in the Bible. You can read about it in 1 Samuel 14. It's quite hilarious in places. I've taught about it before. But he looks at the enemy camp over on a hill and he sneaks out of his own place, just him and his armor bearer, and they come scrambling up a steep hill. And his agreement with the armor bearer is, if the Philistines say, come up here, the Lord's given us the camp. But if the Philistines say, we'll come down to you, then the Lord's not in this and we need to get the heck out of here. And so they go there and the Philistines say, come up here and we want to show you something. And I always joke that they wanted to show them a sharp, pointy something, a sword or some other kind of weapon. But anyways, they climb up the hill, and the two of them, who apparently only have one sword between them, attack this garrison of Philistines, and they prevail. And then the rest of the camp of Israel figure out what's going on, and that the Lord is fighting a battle for them, and then they rally their own troops and they begin to set off to attack the Philistines. And as the battle wears on, partway through, or probably significantly into the day, we read these words in 1 Samuel 14, 24 to 30. And the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day. So Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So none of the people had tasted food. Now when all of the people came to the forest, behold, there was honey on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping. But no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. So he put out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found. For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. In the heat of the battle, Jonathan eats some honey and it revives him. And again, some of you have grown weary in battle, and the Lord is giving you honey. Honey to revive you, honey to brighten your eyes, honey to give you strength and clarity and wisdom. But it may also come with a cost. Later, when Saul finds out, even though Jonathan didn't know about his father's vow, Saul still wants to kill him. It's a really bizarre moment in Israel's history. You have a mighty warrior who's picked a fight with the enemy and has prevailed, and his father is the king, and he's made a foolish oath, which Jonathan knows nothing about. And when he admits that he's eaten honey, his dad says, well, in that case, I'm going to have to kill you. But the people stand up for Jonathan, and they plead with the king, and he relents. Our Father will give you honey to strengthen you in battle. But some people might criticize you. or threaten you because they don't understand that you're supposed to rest between battles. I had a word for a friend of mine a year or so ago, and part of it went something like this. The difference between whether the enemy wears you out or buffs you up is when and how you choose to engage. The difference between the enemy wearing you out and buffing you up relates to how and when you choose to engage. If you try to get fit and you go to the gym or wherever to do that, you don't work the same muscles every single day because your muscles need time to recover to be rebuilt. So you work different muscle groups through different exercises on different days. When the enemy brings a fight to you, you don't have to fight him the whole time. You can put him on hold. You can step back. You can rest up, and then you can re-engage. That's the difference between being worn out and being buffed up. The third character is John the Baptist. Matthew chapter 3 tells us in verses 1 to 6, in those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah when he said, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Now John wore a garment of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey. Then Jerusalem and all Judea and all the region about the Jordan were going out to him, and they were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. John the Baptist was a forerunner of Jesus. He saw himself as a friend of the bridegroom. That's such a brilliant paradigm of what ministry is supposed to look like. We don't win people to ourselves. We win them to the Lord and we get them ready for him. Jesus calls John a burning and shining light. There's a Jason Clark song that he does sometimes, and it begins something like, I've been your echo, but I want to know you so I can be your voice. And John was a voice, not just an echo. But his fashion sense and his diet were a little strange. He ate locusts and wild honey. Locusts speak of destruction and loss. Many of you will know the wonderful promise found in Joel chapter 2:25. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. Prophetic ministry is illustrated by John the Baptist eats locusts for breakfast. It's one of the reasons I love the prophetic. When it's done right, it's so restorative. And many of you have entered a time of restoration. You've specifically started to target places of loss or wounding in your life, places the locusts have been active. And our Father is with you in doing so. However, this morning, he wants to remind you, you need some honey to go with that. As well as addressing the bitter places of pain and trauma and loss, you need some times of sweetness and intimacy too, or you will grow weary. His encouragement to you is something like this: eat a balanced diet, locusts and honey. He really is inviting you, in the words of Psalm 34:8, to taste and see that the Lord is good. So some of you are like Samson. You need to stop eating the counterfeit honey and turn back to the Lord. Some of you are like Jonathan. You need to pause in the battle and eat the honey of the Lord so that you're strengthened, revived, and given clarity and wisdom once more. Some of you are like John the Baptist. You need to eat the honey of intimacy as well as the locusts of pain and loss. You need to follow the good old advice of Mary Poppins. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Sorry, couldn't resist that. But regardless of which one of these characters you relate to, you need to know where to look and what to look for. According to the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, the honey referred to in the Old Testament was in most cases wild honey. The bees constructed their honeycomb and deposited their honey in the holes in the ground, under rocks, or even in crevices between the rocks. Again, let me translate that for you. Most of the honey the Lord wants to give you is wild honey, not domesticated honey. That means he wants to give it to you directly, without a middleman. And he's going to provide it to you while you're between a rock and a hard place. He's going to give it to you even in the hole you've crawled into out of discouragement. So open your eyes and look around with expectation. There's honey to be found. What form will that honey take? It will mostly take the form of him speaking to you. Psalm 19, 7-11, one of C.S. Lewis's favorite Psalms. He said it was the height of poetry in the Psalms. It says, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. His law or his teaching, his testimony, his precepts, his commands, his rules. You know, sometimes I like to remember that the Jewish people, when they speak about the Old Testament, they talk about Torah. And Torah doesn't just mean law, it also means teaching. And I don't know about you, but I hear the word law and my first thoughts and feelings towards it are negative, not positive. I hear the word teaching, it's the other way around. And together these things revive you. They make you wise. They cause you to rejoice, to see clearly and to recognize truth. It really echoes Jonathan's experience, doesn't it? That psalm that says almost exactly the same sort of thing that he describes when he eats the honey in the middle of the battle. So I want to encourage you to take some time this week, even if you don't normally, to open the Bible and read, to pray and ask the Father to speak to you, to show you what you need to know at this point in time. I think you'll find he's been waiting for you. I think you'll find he'll speak when you position yourself to listen. And as you do so, you're going to discover the truth of Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Naturally speaking, honey is filled with nutrients and it does contain healing properties. Let him speak to you afresh this week. Even as we're going to get done a little early this morning, take 5 or 10 minutes just to sit before you go about the rest of your day. Let him speak once more. One of my heroes of the faith of more recent times, John Wimber, who pioneered the vineyard churches, had a vision involving honeycomb early in his ministry after seeing one of his first physical healings. He writes this in one of his books. It really works, I thought, as I winded my way toward home, and God used me as a vehicle of his healing mercy. Then I was jolted out of my jubilant mood by an incredible vision. Suddenly, in my mind's eye, there appeared to be a cloud bank superimposed across the sky. But I'd never seen a cloud bank like this one, so I pulled my car over to the side of the road to take a closer look. Then I realized it was not a cloud bank, but it was a honeycomb with honey dripping out onto the people below. The people were in a variety of postures. Some were reverent. They were weeping and holding their hands out to catch the honey and to taste it, even inviting others to take some of their honey. Others acted irritated, wiping the honey off themselves, complaining about the mess. I was awestruck. Not knowing what to think, I prayed, "Oh Lord, what is it?" He said, "It's my mercy, John. For some people, it's a blessing, but for others, it's a hindrance. There's plenty for everyone. Don't ever beg me for healing again. The problem isn't on my end, John. It's down there." That was a moving and profound experience. Certainly it revolutionized my life more than any other experience I had since becoming a Christian. I've never looked at healing the same way since that day. So that brings me to my closing questions. Friends, what will you do with the particular honey that the Father shares with you? Will you take it and taste it and share it? Or will you get irritated by it, complain about it, and try to wipe it off? Let's pray. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you that you have good in your heart for us. Thank you that you speak to us through your word. So give us ears to hear what you're saying, and give us hearts that receive it, that accept it, that act on it. Father, just even in these next minutes this morning or throughout the course of this week, would you give fresh honey, fresh food from heaven for us? Well, many of us are weary. This year has been such a battle on so many different levels, and it doesn't look like it's done yet. So I ask that you would provide, like you did for Jonathan, nutrition in the heat of the battle. You'd enable us to pause, to rest, to enjoy a lull, to receive what you want to give us, so that we do have wisdom and clarity, so that our strength is revived. Father, I pray for every one of us that you would strengthen us with might in our inner beings, that you would give to us a spirit of wisdom and revelation to know you better. Lord, where you have harder things to say, would you especially give us a grace to go with it, to not be irritated because you don't say the things that we wanted you to say, but to be able to receive them because we know that you have good in your heart for us. You are not trying to deprive us of something. You are trying to take second best and replace it with the best. So I just speak your blessing and your favor over us. We'd increase in our sensitivity to you. In Jesus' name. So I want to speak the Aaronic blessing over you again this morning. So now may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, give you shalom. In Jesus' name.